The war between Earth and the Zyrene Empire had finally ended. After 7 long years of fighting in the stars, peace had come at last. Millions had died, but both sides had agreed to stop. Earth called it Victory Day. Flags flew high. Streets were filled with music, food, and celebration. In the capital city of New Terra Prime, a grand parade marched through the wide streets. Giant screens showed smiling soldiers, flying ships, and people cheering. Earth's top generals rode in hovercars, waving to the crowd. Children tossed flowers. Drones floated above, recording everything. Among the many soldiers marching in line was Private Eli Ward. He was the youngest soldier in his unit, only 19 years old. He wore a clean uniform and polished boots, but he still looked nervous. His brown hair was short and neat, and his green eyes scanned the crowd, unsure of what to do. He hadn't wanted to fight in the war, but he had joined when his older brother was killed in a Zyrene ambush. Eli had trained hard. He had survived missions others didn't. Still, he didn't feel like a hero. He felt small in this giant world of leaders and warriors. Eli walked in perfect line with the others, chest out, hands stiff at his sides. He didn't smile. He just marched, step after step, thinking of home. Then the cheering changed. People started whispering. Some gasped. Others pointed to the sky. A large silver ship floated down slowly above the parade road. Its shape was smooth and elegant, like a whale gliding through water. Blue lights glowed under its body. The ship made no sound, but the air felt heavy around it. The ship landed on a platform built just for this moment. A wide ramp opened with a soft hiss. From inside the ship came tall, glowing beings with smooth skin and bright eyes. Their armor shone like mirrors. They were Zyrene, the very aliens humans had fought. And at the center of them all walked a woman. Her name was Princess Kelia. She was tall and graceful, with skin like silver and long dark blue hair that floated slightly as if touched by wind. Her golden robes shimmered in the sunlight. Round her head floated a glowing crown made of energy. She did not smile. She did not wave. Her eyes moved slowly across the soldiers as she walked past them. The parade came to a halt. Music stopped. Everyone was watching. Kelia walked with her royal guards down the row of human soldiers. The Zyrene tradition after war was strange. Their royal family would choose a bonded warrior from the enemy's army. This was meant to show respect and strength. It was a symbol of unity. Most people thought she would pick a general, or maybe a famous commander. But as Kelia walked, she passed them all. She stopped in front of Eli. He stood still, shocked. His heart pounded in his chest. Why him? Kelia tilted her head and looked at him closely. Her glowing purple eyes scanned his face. His stance, his soul. Eli swallowed hard. He didn't dare move. The alien princess raised one hand and pointed at him. This one, she said softly, her voice ringing like wind chimes. I choose him. Gasps came from both sides of the parade. Officers whispered to each other. Reporters stared in silence. The crowd didn't know how to react. Eli blinked. Me, said too quietly for most to hear. Kelia nodded. You are young, but I see strength, spirit, and truth in you. A general stepped forward. Your Highness, perhaps you would prefer someone of higher rank. Kelia didn't even look at him. I have chosen, the bond is sealed. She turned to her guards and spoke in Zyrene language. They moved toward Eli, surrounding him gently but firmly. Wait, what does this mean? Eli asked, confused. It means, said Kelia, now facing him again, you belong to me. Eli's eyes widened. What? Do not fear, she added. You will be treated with honor, but you are mine now. The general tried to interrupt again, but Earth's president, who had just arrived on the scene, raised his hand. It be, he said, this is Zyrene tradition. You must respect it for the sake of peace. Eli didn't know what to think. The guards motioned for him to follow. He looked back at his fellow soldiers, who stared at him with shocked eyes. He took one step, then another. The crowd was silent as he walked up the ramp beside Kelia. Into the alien ship, the doors closed behind them, and the parade continued without him. Eli sat quietly in a silver chair inside the alien ship. Everything around him felt strange. The walls glowed softly. Air smelled clean, but carried a strange scent like metal and flowers. The floor under his boots was smooth and warm. He looked around. The Zyrene guards stood near the door, silent and still like statues. None of them looked at him. None of them spoke. Then the door slid open with a soft sound. Princess Kelia entered the room, wearing a different robe, still gold, but lighter and simpler. Her long blue hair floated gently as she walked. She looked calm, almost curious. Eli stood up quickly, unsure what to do. "Ma'am, Your Highness?" She raised a hand. "You may sit," Eli warned. He hesitated, then sat down again. Kelia sat across from him on a clear crystal bench. Her glowing eyes stared into his. "You are confused," she said softly. Eli nodded. "Yes, very confused." "Why me? I'm not a hero. I'm just a private." Kelia tilted her head slightly. "I saw many warriors during the parade. Some were proud, some wore medals. Some smiled as if they had already won their place in history. But you," she leaned closer, "you had no mask. You were honest, quiet, but strong. That is rare." Eli didn't know how to respond. "But this bond thing, what does it mean?" "You said, I belong to you." Kelia's face remained calm. "In Zyrene tradition, after war, one royal must choose a bonded warrior from the enemy. This warrior becomes part of our house, not a slave, not a servant." "A symbol? A symbol?" Eli asked. "Yes, a living sign of peace, a show of respect to the enemy, but also a claim of trust, and, in some ways, protection." She paused, and for some more, Eli frowned. "But I didn't agree to this." Kelia nodded slowly. "True, our ways are different from yours. On many worlds, the chosen warrior feels honored. On others, confused." Eli leaned forward, his voice quiet but firm. "Where I come from, people don't belong to others. Not anymore." Kelia watched him. "I understand. Perhaps in time you will choose to stay, not because of tradition, but because of choice." Eli didn't answer. He stared at the floor. His heart felt heavy. After a moment, Kelia stood. "Come, let me show you your quarters." He followed her through wide halls with curved walls and glowing lines. The ship felt alive, like it hummed gently under his feet. Doors opened on their own as they walked. Kelia stopped in front of a tall silver door. It slid open. Inside was a room bigger than any he'd ever stayed in. A soft bed with glowing pillows sat in the middle. A small table held fruit and water. The walls showed moving images of forests and oceans. "This room is yours now," Kelia said. "You may rest, eat, and ask for anything you need. There is no lock. You are not a prisoner." Eli stepped inside slowly. "It's nice, too nice. You are not an enemy anymore," she said. "You are under my protection now. No Zyrene will harm you." Eli turned to face her. "And what do I do now?" "You learn," she said, "about us. And I will learn about you." Then she left, and the door closed behind her. The next few days were strange for Eli. Each morning, a soft bell rang in his room, and light filled the walls. A quiet voice told him the time and offered choices for food. The food looked odd purple. Fruits, soft glowing bread, but tasted better than expected. A Zyrene teacher visited him every day. Her name was Velra, and she spoke calmly, explaining Zyrene customs, language, and history. Eli learned about their 3 moons, their giant trees, and their floating cities. At first, he barely listened. He wanted to go home, but as days passed, curiosity grew. He started asking questions. He wanted to understand why the Zyrene had fought Earth, why they had stopped. He learned that Kelia had voted for peace before the war even ended. One afternoon, Kelia invited him to the Sky Garden, a glass dome near the top of the ship. "Eli," followed her up a winding staircase. When the door opened, he gasped. Inside the dome was a green garden, with floating flowers, small glowing birds, and gentle wind. Above them, stars shone through the clear ceiling. 2 Zyrene moons could be seen in the distance. Kelia stood in the middle, her robe gently moving in the breeze. "I come here to think," she said. "It's beautiful," Eli replied. She looked at him. "Do you still wish to leave?" Eli paused. "Yes, but I don't hate being here anymore." Kelia smiled softly for the first time. "Good, I do not want a prisoner. I want someone who walks beside me willingly." Eli looked up at the stars. "Maybe I can do that." "Maybe." They stood in silence for a while. Then Kelia turned to him. "Tomorrow we arrive at my homeworld. The people there will see you. Some may not like it. You are human, you are young, and you were chosen." "I can handle it," Eli said quietly. "I've been through worse." Kelia nodded with approval. "Then stand tall, Eli Ward. Your journey is only beginning." End of Part 2. The Zyrene capital world was everything Eli had imagined, nothing like it at all. As their ship descended into the atmosphere, the colors below shifted from green to blue to silver. The cities were built on floating platforms, connected by long glowing bridges. Huge crystals, shining like stars, stood tall on the ground. Above them, 3 moons hovered, casting soft light over the scene. Kelia stood beside him, her eyes glowing brighter than usual. "Welcome to Varelia, my home." Eli nodded. He tried to take it all in. The world was beautiful, but it also felt alien. The air was thinner, lighter. And the streets, even though full of life, seemed too perfect, too orderly. No dust, no noise, just smooth, shining surfaces. The people here were different too. They moved gracefully, like they were floating, and their faces were unreadable. Their eyes, like Kelia's, glowed faintly in the dim light. They did not smile, they did not wave. Everything felt controlled. Kelia spoke to him softly. "You will stay close to me. The people here will want to see you, to understand why. I chose you." "I understand," Eli said, though he didn't feel ready. He was just a private soldier. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, and certainly not for something like this. They walked through the grand hall of the palace, where hundreds of Zyrene nobles had gathered. They all turned to look at Eli as he entered. Kelia did not seem nervous, but Eli could feel their eyes on him. Some looked curious, some looked angry. He caught a few whispers, words he couldn't understand, but the tone was clear enough. "This is the human." One Zyrene noble whispered, "The chosen one? She's bonded to him," another muttered. Eli's face reddened. He stood tall, trying to ignore the uncomfortable feeling in his stomach. He looked at Kelia, who stood by his side. Her presence gave him some strength. The noise faded as a Zyrene elder stepped forward. He was tall, with glowing white skin and a crown of sharp silver. He spoke in Zyrene, his voice deep and commanding. Kelia replied in the same language, her voice calm but firm. Then she turned to Eli. "This is Elder Roner. He questions your bond with me." Eli nodded. "I don't mean any harm," he said, trying his best to sound respectful. Roner stared at him, his eyes narrowing. "The bond is not honored by the court. This human is weak. His kind has no place in Zyrene traditions." Kelia's eyes flashed with anger. "He is not weak. He is human, and he is mine. If you do not respect that, you insult me." The elder's eyes hardened. "Human is not a warrior. They are primitive. How can you choose this child to stand by your side?" Eli clenched his fists. He could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on him. He wanted to shout, to argue, but he knew that wouldn't help. He had to show them something different. He had to show them that he wasn't weak. Kelia raised a hand to silence the room. "Enough. Eli has fought in battles you will never understand. He has seen death, fear, and loss, and still he stands. That is strength." Eli looked up at her, surprised by her words. She wasn't just defending him, she was proud of him. The elder didn't speak for a long moment. Then he turned to Kelia. Very well, but know this. Your people will never accept him. He is human. He is young. He is not one of us. Kelia's eyes never left Roner. We will see. After that meeting, Eli stayed close to Kelia, watching how she moved through her world. The Zyrene way of life was orderly, quiet, and full of rules. Everyone had a role, a place. There was no room for mistakes, no space for people to question their traditions, and it was hard to fit in. One day, Kelia brought Eli to a Zyrene training ground. The area was vast, stretching out into the horizon. There were hundreds of Zyrene warriors training in silence. They practiced their combat forms, their speed, their strength. It was impressive. They moved like a single, perfect machine. Eli watched for a while, feeling both amazed and intimidated. His own training back on Earth had been difficult, but this was on a whole different level. The Zyrene didn't fight for honor. They fought because it was part of their way of life. Kelia turned to him. Do you wish to train with them? Eli hesitated. I'm not ready for that. You do not need to be ready, she said. You just need to try. Eli nodded. He stepped onto the training ground, feeling the eyes of the Zyrene warriors. On him, he felt small, out of place. The Zyrene trainer, a tall male with sharp features, approached. He said something in Zyrene, and Kelia translated. He asks if you are ready for the challenge. I'll try, Eli said. His voice steady. Training with the Zyrene was harder than anything Eli had ever done. The first task was simpler. Race. The Zyrene could move faster than any human. Their long legs and smooth movements made them almost impossible to keep up with. Eli struggled to keep pace, his breath growing heavier as he pushed himself forward. After the race, the trainer threw him a training staff. Defend yourself. Eli grabbed it, but his hands were shaky. The Zyrene warrior attacked, moving too fast for Eli to follow. The staff was knocked out of his hands in moments. Again, the trainer said. Eli wiped the sweat from his brow. His heart was racing, but he picked up the staff again. I can do this, he thought. Hours passed. Eli's body ached. His muscles burned, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Kelia watched from the sidelines, her eyes glowing softly. She didn't speak, but Eli could feel her presence steady, calm like a pillar. When the session ended, Eli was exhausted. He collapsed on the ground, breathing heavily. His arms felt like lead. You did well, Kelia said, walking over to him. You did better than I expected. I don't feel like I did anything, Eli said, laughing weakly. Kelia knelt beside him. You survived. That is more than enough. Eli looked up at her. I'm not like them. I don't belong here. You belong with me, Kelia said softly. That is all that matters. The days on Varelia were getting harder for Eli. Each passing day felt like a battle of its own. One where the Zyrene were watching him closely, waiting for him to fail. He had barely started to understand their ways, but it was clear that many of them didn't like the idea of a human standing beside Princess Kelia. Eli had learned that, in the eyes of the Zyrene nobles, humans were weak less than them. They saw him as a symbol of Kelia's mistake. Some mocked him in whispers, others in plain sight. The worst part? Elder Roner, the one who had questioned Eli from the start, was still angry. He thought Kelia had lost her honor by choosing a weak human instead of a true warrior. One evening, as Kelia took Eli to a private garden outside the palace, he could feel the eyes of the nobles on him again. Their stares were colder than usual. Kelia walked ahead, her movements graceful. She had made a habit of teaching Eli about the Zyrene ways. He was learning their language, their history, and their art. But it was all hard work, nothing came easily. Tonight, though, something felt different. There was an uneasy silence around the palace, like a storm was brewing in the distance. As they passed through the garden, Kelia suddenly stopped. Her eyes narrowed as she looked around the dark. Corners. Something's wrong, she muttered, more to herself than to Eli. Eli frowned. He had learned to trust Kelia's instincts. What do you mean? Before Kelia could answer, there was a sudden sound, a rustle in the bushes. Without thinking, Eli stepped forward. He had been trained to react quickly in dangerous situations. Even when he didn't fully understand the risk, Kelia stopped him with a firm hand. "Stay back," she said quietly, her voice sharp. She drew a small weapon from the folds of her robe. The blade shimmered with a faint blue glow. "I know this trick." Kelia stepped forward cautiously. The garden, though beautiful, had shadows where danger could hide. Just then the bushes shook again, and 2 Zyrene soldiers appeared from the shadows. They were armed with energy blades, their eyes cold with anger. Eli took a step back, but Kelia stood tall, unafraid. "You are not welcome here," she said firmly, her voice like ice. The soldiers didn't speak. They didn't need to. Lunged at Kelia with his blade. Kelia dodged quickly, her own weapon flashing out to block his strike. The sound of energy against energy filled the air. The fight was over in seconds. Kelia was too fast, too skilled. She disarmed the soldier with a swift move. Sending his weapon clattering to the ground, Eli stood frozen, unsure whether he should step in. But Kelia turned to him, her expression calm. "Stay close," she said quietly, as though nothing had happened. The soldiers stepped back, their faces showing nothing but hatred. "You should not have chosen him, Princess," one of them growled. "Leave now," Kelia ordered, "or face the consequences." The soldiers didn't move for a moment, but they finally turned and ran into the darkness. Kelia's eyes were hard as she sheathed her blade. "I knew this would happen." Eli was still catching his breath. What just happened? Who were they? "They were sent by those who wish to see me fail," Kelia replied, her tone low and dangerous. "They don't believe in peace. They believe only in strength through war. They think I have dishonored myself by choosing you." Eli couldn't believe what he had just seen. The Zyrene soldiers had attacked them. It was clear they were. Not just ordinary warriors, they were nobles with power and influence. "What do we do now?" Eli asked, his voice uncertain. Kelia turned to face him. "You stay close to me, and we prepare." The next few days were filled with tension. Eli could feel it in the air. The palace seemed to be on edge. The whispers of the nobles had only grown louder, and Kelia had spent more time with her advisors, making plans. But Eli couldn't sit by and wait. He wasn't used to sitting back when trouble was near, so he started to train harder on his own, whenever he had a free moment. If the Zyrene were going to challenge him, he would be ready. And if the time came when Kelia needed him, he would stand beside her one night. As Eli practiced with a training staff in a quiet room near his quarters, a shadow appeared in the doorway. He spun around, his heart racing. It was Kelia. "Are you always this restless?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Eli lowered the staff, surprised. "I have to be ready." Kelia stepped into the room, her eyes softening. "I understand. But you do not have to face this alone. I am with you." Eli's heart calmed a little. "I don't want you to get hurt because of me." Kelia smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I knew what I was choosing when I picked you, Eli. You may be human, but you have something the Zyrene have lost hope." Eli looked down at his hands. He didn't feel strong. He didn't feel special. But hearing Kelia say that made him feel it's important, but he knew their peace was fragile. And there were many forces, both inside the palace and beyond, that wanted to break it. Later that night, as Eli lay in his bed, staring at the glowing stars outside his window, he heard voices outside his door. He sat up, his senses on high alert. He quietly opened the door and peered into the hallway. 2 figures were walking down the hall whispering. Eli didn't recognize them. But their clothes were different from the nobles. They looked like soldiers, but their faces were hidden by hoods. Eli followed them, keeping quiet. They turned into a side corridor near the rear entrance of the palace. There, hidden in the shadows, Eli overheard their conversation. "We can't let this human stay. He will ruin everything," one of the soldiers said. "We need to act before the princess does." "It's the only way to stop her," the other replied. Eli's blood ran cold. They were planning something dangerous, something that could hurt Kelia and him. He turned and rushed back to his room, his mind racing. He had to warn her. But how could he stop them if no one would listen? The morning after Eli overheard the conversation, he barely slept. His mind was too filled with thoughts of the soldiers who had spoken of betrayal, her plans to hurt Kelia and destroy the peace she had worked so hard to build. He couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was going to happen soon. The palace was on edge, and the atmosphere had shifted from tense to downright dangerous. Kelia had noticed the change too. She had been more distant in the last few days, her meetings with advisors becoming longer and more frequent. Eli could see the worry in her eyes, but she said nothing. She knew something was wrong, but she wouldn't tell him everything. Afternoon, after another meeting with her council, Kelia found Eli in the training yard. She watched him as he practiced, moving through his drills with the energy of someone fighting more than just his physical opponent. "Eli," she called. Out. He stopped and turned, his heart pounding. She was wearing her royal armor, her face serious. Something had changed. He could feel it. "You've been on edge," Kelia said softly as she approached him. "Is something troubling you?" Eli hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward. "I overheard something last night. There are soldiers in the palace. They want to hurt you, Kelia. They want to stop the peace." Kelia's eyes narrowed. "I know." Eli was shocked. "You knew?" "I've had suspicions for a while now, but the people who oppose us are clever. They won't attack directly, not yet. But they will strike when we least expect it." Kelia's voice was calm, but Eli could feel the weight of her words. "So, what do we do now?" Eli asked, his fists clenched. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to make their move." Kelia looked at him for a long moment, as if measuring his worth. Finally, she nodded. "You're right. We cannot wait any longer. It's time to make our move first." The next day, the announcement came. The Arena of Honor, huge coliseum, in the heart of Varelia, would be used for a special event. A challenge to prove strength, honor, and loyalty. It was a tradition that went back centuries in the Zyrene Empire. The arena was the place where disputes were settled, where warriors proved their worth, and where enemies could challenge each other in a public display of power. Kelia had chosen the arena for the most important decision of all. She had announced that Eli would fight in the arena as a symbol. But as a warrior, it was a bold move, dangerous even. But it would send a clear message to anyone who opposed her. If Eli could survive the arena, he would prove himself. He would prove to the Zyrene that he was worthy of standing beside her, despite being human. Despite being young, Eli was nervous, but he couldn't back down now. He had come this far. If he was going to protect Keliond, the peace they had fought so hard for, he had to fight. The night before the event, Kelia came to his quarters. She was dressed in her royal robes, her expression unreadable. "I wanted to see you before tomorrow," she said softly, her voice calm. Eli nodded. "I'm ready for this. I'll fight for you." Kelia smiled. "I don't doubt that. Remember, this is not just about fighting for me. It's about fighting for us. For the future of our people." Eli swallowed. "I'll do my best." She stepped closer, her eyes softening. "I know you will. And no matter what happens, I will always stand by you." Eli met her gaze. He felt the weight of her words, the trust she had placed in him. It was more than just a bond, it was a partnership. One that would define the future of both their worlds. The next day, Eli stood at the gates of the Arena of Honor. The Colosseum was massive, filled with thousands of Zyrene spectators. The stands were full, their faces glowing with anticipation. Above them, the sky was clear, the twin moons shining down on the arena. Eli felt small, standing in the center of the arena, his heart racing. His body was covered in light armor, a training staff in his hands. This was the moment that would decide everything. If he won, he would prove himself to Kelia's people. If he lost, well, he didn't want to think about that. The horn sounded. The crowd grew silent, waiting for the match to begin. Across from him stood Varen, a Zyrene warrior. He was tall, built like a mountain, and his armor gleamed in the sunlight. His eyes were cold and unforgiving. "Are you ready, human?" Varen asked, in a deep voice. Eli gripped his staff, his hand shaking slightly. "I'm ready." The fight began. Varen charged at him, his energy blade flashing. Eli barely had time to react as Varen swung with deadly speed. He ducked just in time, feeling the rush of air as the blade missed his head by inches. Eli quickly countered, striking Varen's side with his staff. The blow was weak, but it made Varen step back. The crowd gasped. They had not expected the human to land a hit. Varen growled, his pride hurt. He swung again, faster this time. Eli dodged, but only just. His training had prepared him for this moment, but it was different now. The Zyrene were faster, stronger. Every move felt like a fight for his life. Kelia watched from the stands, her eyes never leaving Eli. She knew the stakes. If Eli fell now, everything they had worked for would be lost. The fight continued. Eli's muscles screamed in pain, his breath coming in quick bursts. But he wouldn't stop. He couldn't. Not now. Finally, after a long, grueling battle, Eli saw an opening. Varen's energy blade had slipped, just for a moment. Eli seized the chance. With a swift move, he knocked Varen's weapon out of his hands and pushed him to the ground. The crowd went silent. Eli stood over Varen, panting. His heart raced. He hadn't won yet, but he had proven something. Kelia stood and stepped forward, her voice carrying across the arena. "This is the strength I chose. This is my warrior. Eli Ward has proven his worth." The crowd was still for a moment, then slowly they began to cheer. The roar of approval filled the air, shaking the ground beneath them. Eli had done it. He'd fought not just for Kelia, but for the future of both their worlds. The cheering in the arena still echoed in Eli's ears as he stepped off the field. His body ached, his arms felt heavy. There were bruises along his side, and he had small cuts on his hands. But none of it mattered. He had done it. He had stood in front of thousands of Zyrene, faced one of their strongest warriors, and proved that a simple soldier from Earth, could be strong, smart, and worthy of respect. Kelia met him at the gate of the arena. She didn't say anything at all. First, her eyes met his, and in that moment, there was no need for words. "I'm proud of you," she said finally, her voice soft. Eli gave a tired smile. "Thanks. I'm proud of me too." She reached out and gently touched his shoulder. "You did. More than win a fight, you won them over." Eli looked around. Zyrene nobles who had once doubted him were now nodding. Some even gave small bows of respect. Even Elder Roner, who had once called him weak, stood still with a thoughtful look on his face. The tide had changed. That night, the palace held a special gathering to honor Eli's victory. The halls were full of light and music. Zyrene artists performed their glowing instruments, filling the air with calming sounds. Silver lights floated across the ceiling like stars. Eli stood beside Kelia, dressed in formal robes gifted to him by her house. They were light blue with gold markings, colors of peace and strength. He wasn't used to wearing anything fancy, but tonight was different. Zyrene nobles came to greet him one by one. "You showed great courage. Your spirit reminds me of the old warriors. Perhaps humans are stronger than we believed." Eli nodded politely, still a bit overwhelmed by the sudden change. Just a few days ago, most of them didn't even want him here. Now they were. Speaking to him with respect, Kelia stood proudly beside him, listening and smiling. But deep inside, she knew the peace they had earned today needed care. One victory did not end all danger. Later, when the gathering was over, she and Eli walked quietly through the palace gardens. The air was cool. The stars above Varelia were bright, and the 3 moons lit the sky in soft blue and white. Eli looked up. "I never thought I'd be here." Kelia smiled. "Neither did I." He turned to her. "So, what happens now?" Kelia looked ahead. "We begin again. The real work starts. Earth and Varelia must learn from each other. We must build peace, not just between leaders, but between people and me," Eli asked. Kelia stopped walking and faced him. "You have a choice, Eli. I won't order you. I won't claim you. I chose you once as part of tradition. But now, I ask you." She gently held out her hand. "Will you stay? Not as a symbol, not as a trophy, but as my equal, my partner." Eli looked at her hand. He remembered the day she first pointed at him during the parade. Back then, he had felt powerless, but not anymore. He reached out and took her hand. "Yes," he said, "but on one condition." Kelia raised an eyebrow. "And what is that?" "That we work together. That you teach me and I teach you. That we protect each other and our people." Kelia smiled, a real smile, full of warmth. "Agreed." Weeks passed. News of Eli's victory spread across the stars. On Earth, people celebrated the human soldier who had earned the respect of an alien empire. Children learned his name in school. Veterans spoke of him with pride. Kelia and Eli worked side by side, helped build new programs for peace schools, training centers, shared missions. Human engineers visited Varelia. Zyrene scholars came to Earth. Slowly, carefully, a new future took shape. Of course, not everything was perfect. There were still those who doubted. Some humans feared the Zyrene. Some Zyrene still looked down on humans. But Eli never let it slow him down. He kept training, learning, and teaching. Every day, he proved that respect could grow in between enemies. One day, Kelia and Eli stood together on a new planet, a joint colony, built by both Earth and Zyrene hands. It was full of green forests, clear rivers, and shining cities. It was a symbol of what they could build together. As they looked out over the valley, Kelia said, "When I first saw you, you were just a quiet soldier in a parade. But I saw something others didn't." Eli chuckled. "Yeah, a lost teenager in a stiff uniform." Kelia laughed softly. "No, I saw courage. It's the kind of courage that doesn't shout, the kind that endures." Eli looked into her glowing purple eyes. "I saw someone willing to fight for peace even when her own people turned against her." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sunset. Then Kelia whispered among all the soldiers, "I chose you." Eli squeezed her hand, "And I chose to stay."